My SEL asked if my baby was really my husband's at dinner. I asked if hers was really her husband's. My sister-in-law Claire has hated me since the day I married her brother. But last night at family dinner, she went nuclear. We were celebrating my daughter Jenna's first birthday. The whole family gathered, my parents, my husband Tom's parents, his sister Claire with her husband Mark and their 2 kids. Jenna has gorgeous red hair. It's striking, copper curls that catch the light. Neither Tom nor I have red hair, but my grandmother did. Genetics are funny that way. Claire's been making comments since Jenna was born. Interesting hair color. Where did that come from? So unique in your family. Last night she escalated. During dinner, while Jenna sat in her high chair covered in mashed potatoes, Claire clinked her glass. I have something to say, she announced. As family, I feel it's my duty to address the elephant in the room. Tom tensed beside me. His mother said, Claire, not now. When then? We're all thinking it. She turned to Tom. Have you considered a paternity test? The table went silent. Excuse me? Tom's voice was deadly quiet. Red hair, Tom. Neither of you have red hair. And the timing. She smiled sweetly. Jenna was born exactly 9 months after your Vegas conference. The one where you said Jennifer stayed home sick. I had been sick. Food poisoning from bad sushi. Tom went alone. Are you suggesting... I started. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. That baby doesn't look like Tom. And we all know about Jenny's college boyfriend. Ryan, the redhead? Ryan, who I dated for 3 months freshman year, 12 years ago. Tom's mother gasped. Claire, apologize immediately. I'm just concerned about my brother. If Jennifer trapped him with another man's baby. Enough! Tom slammed his hand on the table. But I stayed calm. Deadly calm. I'd been preparing for this moment since Claire started her comments months ago. You're absolutely right, Claire. Paternity matters. In fact, I completely agree that families should verify these things. She looked triumphant. So you'll do a test? Sure, right after you. What? I pulled out my phone. See, when you started making comments about Jenna, I got curious about your kids. Your son Jake has brown eyes. You have blue. Mark has blue. 2 blue-eyed parents can't have a brown-eyed child. Basic genetics. Claire went white. That's not... Genetics are complicated. They are. So I did some digging. Remember your husband's best friend, Daniel? Brown eyes. Spent a lot of time at your house 8 years ago. Right around when Jake was conceived. Mark looked at Claire. What is she talking about? Nothing. She's lying. Am I? I scrolled through my phone. These are from your Instagram. You and Daniel. Lots of cozy photos from that summer. This one's interesting. You're wearing Mark's college shirt, but he was deployed then. Who took this photo, Claire? Stop it, Claire hissed. Oh, and Sarah, your daughter? She has that adorable cleft chin. Neither you nor Mark have cleft chins, but your personal trainer Josh does. You trained with him a lot 6 years ago. Mark stood up. Claire, what the hell? She's making things up. She's deflecting. Tom's dad intervened. Everyone calm down. No, I said. Claire wanted to discuss paternity at a family dinner. Let's discuss it. I looked at Mark. Did you know Claire had Josh's number saved under pizza delivery in her phone? Found that out from her friend Monica. They had a falling out last year. Monica's very chatty after wine. Claire was crying now. You investigated me? You accused me of cheating and trapping your brother. You've been implying my daughter isn't his for a year. So yes, I looked into you. Want to know what else I found? Please stop, she whispered. The credit card statements showing hotel charges during your book club meetings? The second phone you keep at your office? Mark grabbed his keys. Kids, we're leaving. Mark, wait. 8 years. 8 years I've been raising another man's son? Tom finally spoke. Actually, Mark, that's not true. Everyone turned to him. Jake is yours. I had a DNA test done months ago when Claire started this nonsense about Jenna. Figured if she was projecting this hard about infidelity, maybe she had reason. Jake's your biological son. Then why does he have brown eyes? I asked, genuinely confused. Tom pulled out his phone. Because Mark's father has brown eyes. It can skip a generation. I asked your mom, Mark. Your dad has brown eyes, right? Mark's mother nodded. Yes, Harold has brown eyes. So Jake wasn't Daniel's. But Claire didn't know Tom had tested him. Which meant, you thought Jake wasn't Mark's, I said to Claire. For 8 years you believed you were hiding another man's child. Claire sobbed harder. Mark looked destroyed. Even if Jake's mine, and Sarah? I asked. Want to explain Josh? That's when Tom's mother stood up. I need to tell you all something about Sarah. Everyone looked at her. Sarah is Mark's. I know because I know who her real mother is. The room went silent. What? Claire and Mark said in unison. Tom's mother looked at me. Jenny, I'm sorry. I promised never to tell. But your sister, she needs to know the truth. My blood went cold. What about my sister? Tom's mother stood frozen, her hand still gripping the back of her chair. The restaurant noise faded to nothing as every person at our table stared at her. My heart hammered against my ribs. Whatever she was about to say, I knew it would crack open something that couldn't be put back together. Her eyes found mine across the table and they were wet with tears. "Rachel is Sarah's biological mother," she said. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Not Claire. Rachel gave birth to Sarah 6 years ago." The restaurant tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from sliding off my chair. "Rachel. My sister, Rachel." The room spun as Tom's mother kept talking, explaining that Rachel and Mark had dated briefly years ago, before Mark ever met Claire. I couldn't process it. My sister had a baby. My sister had a daughter. And I never knew. Mark's face drained of all color. He looked between Tom's mother and Claire like he was watching a tennis match in slow motion. His mouth opened and closed without sound. Finally, words came out in a stammer. He never knew Rachel was pregnant. She just disappeared one day, stopped answering his calls, blocked him on everything. He thought she'd gotten bored and moved on. That's what she wanted him to think. Claire's sobs got louder and more desperate. She pressed her hands over her face, her whole body shaking. Through her fingers, she admitted it. She knew. She'd always known. She and Mark adopted Sarah through a private arrangement when Rachel couldn't keep her. Tom's mother explained that Rachel was only 19, barely more than a kid herself. She was using drugs, living in a bad situation, spiraling. Giving up Sarah was supposed to save the baby from that life. Rachel begged Tom's mother to help find good parents for her daughter. My stomach twisted into knots so tight I thought I might throw up right there on the table. My sister gave up a child. A whole child. And nobody told me. Not Rachel, not my parents, nobody. I had a niece I'd never known about, and she'd been sitting at family dinners for years while I had no idea. Tom reached under the table and grabbed my hand. His palm was warm and solid. I pulled away. I couldn't accept comfort when my whole world was turning inside out. Tom's father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He suggested we leave immediately before we made more of a scene. Other diners were definitely staring now, trying to pretend they weren't watching our family implode. Everyone nodded in stunned agreement. We gathered our things in silence. Jenna was still in her high chair, mashed potatoes dried on her face, completely unaware that the adults around her were falling apart. I picked her up mechanically, grabbing the diaper bag with my other hand. Nobody spoke as we filed out of the restaurant. Back at Tom's parents' house, I went straight for my phone. My hands shook so badly I could barely unlock it. I called Rachel. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. On the 3rd try, I left a message. My voice came out strange and high. I asked her to call me back urgently, that something had happened at dinner and we needed to talk. I didn't say what. How could I even explain this in a voicemail? I hung up and stared at my phone, willing it to ring. Rachel kept this secret for 6 years. 6 entire years. Had she been watching Sarah grow up from a distance this whole time? Did she show up to family gatherings hoping to catch a glimpse of her daughter? My mind raced through every family event, every holiday, trying to remember if Rachel had acted strange around Sarah. I couldn't recall anything obvious. Maybe she'd gotten good at hiding it. Claire sat on the couch in Tom's parents' living room. Her body collapsed in on itself like a broken doll. Mark stood on the opposite side of the room, as far from her as he could get without leaving. He wouldn't even look in her direction. His jaw was clenched, so tight I could see the muscles working. Tom's mother sat in an armchair, her hands folded in her lap. She started explaining how it all happened. Rachel had called her in a panic when she was 4 months pregnant. She was scared, alone, using drugs she couldn't quit. She begged Tom's mother to help her find a good family for the baby. Tom's mother had just watched Claire suffer through her 2nd miscarriage. Claire had been devastated, crying for days, saying she felt broken and useless. When Tom's mother suggested the private adoption, Claire grabbed onto it like a lifeline. Mark's voice cut through the room, sharp and angry. Why didn't anyone tell him the baby was his? Tom's mother looked down at her hands. Rachel made her promise not to reveal who the father was. Rachel wanted a clean break. She thought Mark would have a better life not knowing he'd gotten a teenage girl pregnant during what was supposed to be a casual summer thing. She didn't want him tied to her mess. She didn't want him to feel obligated to fix her broken life. Something clicked into place in my head. Claire had hated me for years with an intensity that never made sense. Every time she looked at me, she was reminded that Sarah wasn't biologically hers. Every time we had a family gathering, she saw me with my sister, saw the resemblance between Rachel and Sarah that she prayed nobody else would notice. Tom's mother said Claire became obsessed with the idea that I would somehow discover the truth. She thought I'd expose her, destroy her family, take Sarah away. So she tried to strike first. She attacked Jenna's paternity to deflect attention, to make me the suspicious one instead of her. Tom's voice cut through the room like a knife. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. His face was red, redder than I'd ever seen it, and his hands were shaking as he pointed at his mother. He told her she'd had years to come clean about this. Years to tell him the truth about Sarah. Years to stop Claire from tearing into me at every family gathering. He said she chose to protect Claire instead of being honest with her own son. She let Claire attack me for a year while knowing the real reason Claire was so paranoid. His voice got louder with each word. He asked her how she could watch Claire accuse me of cheating and not say anything. How she could let me be treated like garbage in this family when she knew the truth the whole time. Tom's father tried to put a hand on his shoulder, but Tom shook him off. He said his mother had enabled Claire's cruelty and let it poison the whole family. That she'd chosen sides and it wasn't his side or mine. Claire's voice came out small and broken. She said she'd been scared for 6 years. Every single day she woke up afraid that Sarah would find out somehow. That someone would see the resemblance between Sarah and Rachel. That Rachel would show up and want her daughter back. She said the fear ate at her constantly. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't relax. Every time we had a family gathering, she watched me and Rachel, terrified we'd figure it out. She said looking at me hurt because I had everything she didn't. I could have babies naturally. I didn't have to live with a secret that could destroy my family. She knew it wasn't fair to hate me for that, but she couldn't stop herself. The guilt and fear twisted into anger, and I was the easiest target. She said she knew it was wrong, but she couldn't control it. Mark moved closer to Claire but didn't sit down. His voice was quiet and hard. He asked her directly if she'd ever slept with Daniel. Claire shook her head fast, crying harder. She said no, never. Then Mark asked about Josh. Claire looked down at her hands. She admitted she'd had an emotional affair with Josh. They'd texted constantly, met for coffee, talked about personal things she should have talked to Mark about. But she swore she never slept with him, never even kissed him. She said she was so convinced Jake wasn't Mark's because of the brown eyes that she almost confessed to an affair that never happened. She thought if she admitted to sleeping with Daniel, it would explain Jake's eyes. She'd been ready to destroy her marriage over a lie just to make the genetics make sense. She said living with the guilt of thinking she'd had another man's baby, while knowing she'd never actually cheated, made her feel crazy. The emotional affair with Josh happened because she was already drowning in guilt and fear and needed someone to talk to who wasn't part of the family mess. I stood up without saying anything. My legs felt shaky, but I made it to the hallway. I found the bathroom and locked the door behind me. Then I completely fell apart. I sat on the floor with my back against the tub and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. My whole body shook. Rachel had a baby. Rachel gave up a baby. Sarah was my niece, and I never knew. For 6 years, I'd been around my own niece and had no idea. And now Rachel would find out that I'd exposed the secret. She'd know that everyone knew. I'd been so focused on destroying Claire that I hadn't thought about what other secrets might come out. What damage I might cause beyond Claire's marriage. The bathroom door handle rattled. Tom's voice came through asking if I was okay. I couldn't answer. He tried the handle again, and I heard him telling his father to find a key. A minute later, the door opened. Tom came in and sat on the floor next to me. He pulled me against his chest and I sobbed into his shirt. He kept saying he was sorry. Sorry for his family. Sorry for his mother. Sorry that I'd married into such a broken mess. Sorry that my revenge had blown up in a way neither of us expected. He stroked my hair and let me cry until I couldn't anymore. When I finally stopped crying, my face felt swollen and my head hurt. Tom helped me stand up. I washed my face with cold water and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and puffy. My makeup was completely ruined. But I felt weirdly calm now. Like crying had released something that had been building for a year. I told Tom I needed to find Rachel right away. She deserved to hear this from me before anyone else called her. Before Claire or his mother decided to reach out. Tom nodded and said that was the right thing to do. We walked back to the living room together. Everyone looked up when we came in. Tom's mother started to stand, but I held up my hand. I told them all that I was going to find Rachel and tell her everything. That she deserved to know before anyone else contacted her. Tom's mother said maybe she should be the one to tell Rachel since she was the one who arranged the adoption. I looked at her and said no. She'd had 6 years to tell Rachel the truth was coming out. 6 years to prepare her. She'd chosen to keep the secret. Now Rachel would hear it from me, her sister, not from the woman who helped hide her daughter from her. Tom's mother's face crumpled, but she didn't argue. We left Tom's parents' house around 10 at night. The drive home was quiet. Jenna had fallen asleep in her car seat. I kept checking my phone to see if Rachel had called back. Nothing. When we got home, I tried calling again. Still no answer. I left another voicemail asking her to call me as soon as she got this. That it was urgent. That I needed to talk to her tonight if possible. Tom put Jenna to bed while I paced the kitchen. I tried texting Rachel. I kept the text vague, just said I needed to talk to her about something important involving the family. Around 11:30, my phone finally rang. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I answered before the second ring. Rachel asked what was wrong and why I'd called so many times. I told her I couldn't explain over the phone, but I needed to see her. Could we meet for breakfast in the morning? Rachel said I was scaring her and asked if someone had died. I said no, nothing like that. But I had to tell her something in person. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she agreed to meet me at the diner near her apartment at 8 in the morning. After we hung up, I knew I wouldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Tom staring at the ceiling. He held my hand but didn't try to make conversation. There was nothing to say that would make this better. Morning came too slowly and too fast at the same time. I got to the diner 15 minutes early and ordered coffee I couldn't drink. My stomach was in knots. Rachel walked in right at 8. She looked worried. She slid into the booth across from me and asked what was going on. I didn't know how to start, so I just told her everything. The dinner. Claire's accusation about Jenna. My revenge with the information about Jake and Sarah. Tom revealing he'd already tested Jake. Then his mother standing up and saying she knew who Sarah's real mother was. Rachel's face went white. I kept talking. I told her what Tom's mother had said about the adoption. About Mark being Sarah's father. About Claire raising Rachel's daughter for 6 years. Rachel started crying before I finished. She put her face in her hands and her shoulders shook. The waitress came over to ask if we wanted to order, but I waved her away. When Rachel finally looked up, her face was red and wet. She said she'd thought about Sarah every single day for 6 years. Every birthday. Every holiday. Every time she saw a little girl with dark hair. She'd convinced herself the adoption was the right choice. That Sarah was better off with parents who could give her stability and love that Rachel couldn't provide at 19. But it had never stopped hurting. Rachel started talking faster. She said she'd been in a really dark place when she got pregnant. She was using drugs. She could barely take care of herself. She was living in a terrible apartment with people who were bad news. When she found out she was pregnant, she panicked. She didn't know what to do. She'd met Tom's mother a few times through Mark. They'd talked at a couple of parties. Tom's mother had always been nice to her. So Rachel called her in desperation. She begged for help finding good adoptive parents. She didn't want to go through an agency. She wanted to know the baby would go to someone who really wanted a child. Tom's mother told her about Claire's miscarriages. About how desperate Claire was to be a mother. Rachel met with Claire and Mark once before Sarah was born. They seemed like good people. Stable. Ready to love a baby. Rachel signed the papers 2 days after Sarah was born. She held her daughter for maybe an hour total. Then she left the hospital and tried to pretend it never happened. I asked Rachel if she'd been watching Sarah from a distance all these years. Rachel nodded. She admitted she knew Claire's social media passwords. She'd figured them out about a year after the adoption. She'd been following Sarah's life through photos and posts ever since. Every picture Claire posted of Sarah, Rachel saved to a private folder on her phone. She knew what Sarah looked like at every age. Knew she liked dinosaurs and hated broccoli. Knew she was scared of thunderstorms. Rachel said it was torture watching her daughter grow up through a screen. Seeing her take first steps, lose her first tooth, start kindergarten, all through stolen glimpses of someone else's life. But she couldn't stop herself from looking. She needed to know Sarah was okay. That giving her up had been worth it. Rachel told me she got clean 2 years ago. Really clean. Not just saying it. She'd been in therapy since then, dealing with the grief and guilt of giving up Sarah. Her therapist had asked if she ever thought about reaching out to Claire and Mark about visitation rights. Rachel said she'd thought about it constantly, but she was terrified. Terrified of disrupting Sarah's life. Terrified of Claire's anger. Terrified that Sarah would hate her for giving her away. Terrified that Mark would feel trapped or obligated. So she'd stayed silent and watched from the shadows and tried to build a life worth living. She said some days were okay, and some days the grief felt like drowning. But she'd been managing. Until now. Now everything was exploding and she had no idea what happened next. I set my coffee cup down and looked at Rachel across the table. She needed to understand what was coming. Mark and Claire's marriage was done, I told her, and the adoption might not hold up now that Mark knew Sarah was his biological daughter. Rachel's face went white. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned pale. The idea of being thrown into Sarah's life without any warning clearly scared her. She asked what that meant. If Mark could just take Sarah away from Claire. I explained that family courts were complicated, but Mark had rights as the biological father that he didn't know he had before. Rachel looked like she might be sick. We stayed at that coffee shop for 4 hours. The staff refilled our cups 3 times and probably wanted us to leave, but we kept talking. Rachel kept asking the same questions in different ways. What did Sarah know? Would Sarah hate her? What if this hurt Sarah more than helped? I tried to answer honestly. Sarah thought Claire was her mom, had no idea about the adoption. Rachel said she wanted to know her daughter but was terrified of causing damage. She kept saying she'd already hurt Sarah once by giving her up, and what if meeting her biological mother just confused and upset her more? I told Rachel we'd figure it out together, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't ready for this, but ready or not, it was happening. That afternoon, my phone rang while I was driving home. Tom's voice sounded tired when I answered. He told me Mark had moved out, packed a bag that morning and left the house he shared with Claire. He was staying with a friend from work, someone Claire didn't know well. Claire was apparently a mess, calling Tom every hour crying and begging him to talk to Mark. But Mark wasn't answering her calls. Tom said Mark told him he couldn't even look at Claire right now. 8 years of marriage, and it was all built on secrets and lies. Mark needed space to think about what that meant for his life and his kids. Tom asked how things went with Rachel. I told him about our conversation, about how scared she was. He was quiet for a minute, then said Mark wanted to meet with Rachel. He wanted to talk about Sarah, about what happened 6 years ago and what happens next. My stomach dropped. I asked when. Tom said Mark was thinking next week, whenever Rachel was ready. He wanted me there too, if I was willing. I said I'd ask Rachel and let him know. I called Rachel as soon as I got home. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting for my call. I told her what Tom said about Mark wanting to meet. There was silence on the other end for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Rachel asked if I'd be there with her. Her voice shook when she said it. I promised I would. We picked a day the following week, a Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. Rachel made me promise again that I'd be there, that I wouldn't leave her alone with Mark. I swore I wouldn't. The next few days felt heavy. I kept thinking about that dinner, about Claire's face when everything came out. I'd wanted to hurt her for what she'd done to me. For a year of comments and implications about Jenna, I'd succeeded. But now I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah, who had no idea her whole world was about to change. Or Rachel, who'd spent 6 years watching her daughter grow up through stolen glimpses of social media. Tom kept telling me I didn't do anything wrong. Claire started it, he said. She accused you first. But I felt sick anyway. I'd gone after Claire so hard, dug up so much information, and now innocent people were getting hurt. Sarah didn't ask for any of this. Rachel didn't ask for her secret to be exposed. Even Jake was caught in the middle of his parents' marriage falling apart. I told Tom I felt like I'd thrown a grenade into everyone's lives. He held me and said, Claire threw the first grenade, I just threw it back. But that didn't make me feel better. Tom's mother called on Thursday. I almost didn't answer. I stared at her name on my phone screen for 3 rings before I picked up. She apologized immediately, said she was sorry for keeping the secret all these years. Sorry for not protecting me from Claire's attacks. She admitted she knew Claire was projecting her guilt onto me, but she'd convinced herself that keeping peace in the family mattered more than standing up for what was right. I listened without saying much. She kept talking, filling the silence with more apologies and explanations. She said she'd been wrong, that she should have told Mark the truth years ago, should have stopped Claire from tormenting me, should have been a better mother to Tom and a better grandmother to Jenna. I finally interrupted her and said I needed to see her in person. We couldn't do this over the phone. We met at a park near her house on Saturday morning. She looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. We sat on a bench and watched some kids play on the swings. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I wasn't sure I could forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She'd watched Claire attack me for a year and said nothing. She'd known the truth about Sarah and kept it hidden while Claire used that secret as a weapon. Tom's mother nodded slowly. She said she understood if I needed distance from her. She wouldn't blame me. I told her I needed time to figure out what our relationship looked like going forward. She said she'd wait as long as it took, but her eyes were wet when she said it. We sat there for a while longer without talking much. Then I left. The walk back to my car felt longer than it should have. Tuesday came faster than I wanted. I picked Rachel up from her apartment and we drove to the coffee shop together. She barely spoke during the drive, just stared out the window and twisted her hands in her lap. I asked if she was okay and she said no, but she had to do this anyway. The coffee shop was busy, full of people on laptops and meeting for lunch. Mark was already there when we arrived. He sat at a corner table and I barely recognized him. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled and he needed a shave. Rachel froze when she saw him. I had to touch her elbow to get her moving again. We walked to the table and Mark stood up. He and Rachel stared at each other for a long moment. Neither of them seemed to know what to say. I suggested we all sit down. We did. The silence stretched out uncomfortable and thick. Mark spoke first. He said he wasn't angry with Rachel about the adoption. His voice was quiet, careful. He told her he understood she'd been young and struggling and made what she thought was the best choice. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Mark said he was angry with Claire for lying to him for 6 years. Angry with his mother for helping keep the secret, but not angry with Rachel. She'd been 19 and scared and trying to do right by her baby. He got that. Rachel finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She said she was sorry. Sorry for not telling him about the pregnancy back then. She explained that she'd been ashamed and scared. She thought Mark would be better off not knowing, that he'd have a better life without being tied to her and her problems. Mark listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said he accepted her apology, but now they had to figure out what happened next. Sarah would need to know the truth eventually, and they had to decide together how to handle it. Rachel apologized again. She kept saying sorry, like if she said it enough times it would fix things. She told Mark she'd been ashamed back then, convinced she was doing him a favor by keeping the pregnancy secret. She thought he'd be trapped if he knew. stuck with a teenage addict and a baby he didn't plan for. Mark's face softened a little. He said he wished she'd told him anyway, that he would have wanted to know. But he understood why she didn't. Rachel wiped her eyes with a napkin. She said she'd thought about telling him 1,000 times over the years, but convinced herself it was too late, that reaching out would only make everything worse. Mark nodded slowly. Then he said what they really needed to talk about was Sarah. She was 6 years old and had no idea Claire wasn't her biological mother. They had to figure out when and how to tell her, and what Rachel's role in Sarah's life would be. The conversation was just beginning, and we all knew it would be the first of many. We talked for another hour about Sarah. Mark wanted to make sure we all understood what we were dealing with. A 6-year-old kid who thought her mom was someone else entirely. He kept saying we needed professional help, that none of us knew how to handle this kind of thing. Rachel agreed immediately. She said she'd do whatever the experts recommended, that she just wanted what was best for Sarah. I watched them talk and noticed how careful they were with each other. No anger, no blame. Just two people trying to figure out the right thing to do for a child they both loved. Mark pulled out his phone and started looking up child psychologists who specialized in adoption issues. He found 3 in our area and said he'd call them all tomorrow. Rachel asked if she could be part of choosing the therapist, and Mark said yes without hesitating. They discussed what they'd tell the psychologist about the situation. The private adoption, the lies, the sudden revelation. It sounded worse when they laid it out like that. Mark said Sarah's emotional health had to come first, before anyone's feelings or wants. If the therapist said Sarah wasn't ready to meet Rachel, then they'd wait. Rachel's face crumpled at that, but she nodded. She wiped her eyes again and thanked Mark for letting her be involved at all. Her voice shook when she said she never thought she'd get this chance, that she'd accepted years ago that she'd given up any right to know her daughter. Mark looked at her across the table and his eyes got wet too. He said that despite everything, despite how much it hurt to learn the truth this way, he was glad Sarah would get to know her biological mother. He said every kid deserved to know where they came from. Rachel started crying for real then. Not quiet tears, but actual sobs that made other people in the coffee shop look over at us. Mark reached across and put his hand over hers. He told her it was going to be okay, that they'd figure it out together. I felt my own throat get tight watching them. These two people who'd made a baby together when they were barely adults, who'd been kept apart by lies for 6 years, trying to do right by their kid. It felt important somehow, like something broken was starting to heal even though it would never be the same as if it had never broken at all. The weeks after that meeting moved fast. Mark filed for divorce from Claire. Tom told me about it one night while we were getting Jenna ready for bed. He said Claire had moved in with his parents temporarily because she couldn't afford her own place yet. She was seeing a therapist twice a week and had started taking medication for depression and anxiety. Tom said his mom told him Claire was finally dealing with mental health issues she'd ignored for years. The guilt about Sarah, the fear of being exposed, it had all built up into this toxic thing inside her that came out as cruelty toward me. I felt strange hearing that. Not sorry for her exactly, but less angry maybe. Understanding why someone acts terrible doesn't make it okay, but it makes it make sense. Tom and I started going to couples counseling too. Our therapist was this older woman with gray hair and kind eyes who didn't let us get away with anything. She made us talk about how Tom's family had affected our marriage, how his mom keeping secrets had created an environment where lies were normal, how Claire's attacks on me had made me defensive and Tom protective in ways that weren't healthy. We learned to set boundaries, real ones. Not just saying we would, but actually doing it. We agreed that Jenna came first, that protecting her from family drama was more important than keeping the peace with Tom's parents or Claire. It felt good to say that out loud and have Tom agree completely. Rachel found a family therapist who worked with adoption cases. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. The woman specialized in helping biological parents reunify with children who'd been adopted. Rachel saw her every week. She told me the therapist was helping her understand that building a relationship with Sarah would take years, not months. That she couldn't rush it or push for more than Sarah was ready to give. Rachel had to accept that she might always be secondary to Claire in Sarah's heart. That being the biological mother didn't automatically make her the real mother in Sarah's eyes. I could tell that hurt her, but she was trying to be realistic about it. Mark started taking Sarah to a child psychologist. He didn't tell Sarah why at first, just said the therapist was someone she could talk to about her feelings. The psychologist spent the first few sessions just building trust with Sarah, playing games and doing art projects. She told Mark that Sarah needed to feel safe with her before they could start preparing her for the news about the adoption. The psychologist said they'd know when Sarah was ready, that it wasn't something they could force on a timeline. Mark accepted that even though I could tell he wanted to get it over with. The waiting was hard on everyone. Claire reached out to me through Tom about a month after everything exploded. She asked if we could meet to talk. I didn't want to. I told Tom I wasn't ready to see her, that I was still too angry. But he said she was really struggling, that she was trying to make amends and maybe I should at least hear her out. I thought about it for a few days. Finally I agreed, but only if we met somewhere public, We decided on a park near my house. I got there first and sat on a bench near the playground, watched some kids on the swings and tried to calm my nerves. When Claire showed up, I barely recognized her. She looked terrible. Thin in a way that wasn't healthy, like she'd forgotten to eat for weeks. Her face was pale and she had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Her hair needed washing and her clothes hung loose on her frame. She looked like someone who'd been sick for a long time. She sat down on the other end of the bench, keeping distance between us. We didn't say anything for a minute, just sat there while kids screamed and played around us. Claire spoke first. She apologized for everything. For years of being cruel to me. For the comments about Jenna. For the accusations at the dinner. Her voice was quiet and flat, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. She said her guilt about Sarah had made her paranoid. She was so scared someone would find out the truth that she saw threats everywhere. And I represented everything she wasn't. A woman who could have babies naturally, who didn't have to lie to her husband, who seemed to have it all together. She said attacking me made her feel less powerless somehow. She knew the apology didn't fix anything, didn't undo the damage. But she wanted me to understand that her behavior was never really about me. It was about her own fear and self-hatred. I listened without interrupting. Let her get it all out. When she finished, she looked at me with these hollow eyes, waiting for me to respond. I took a breath and told her I understood why she did what she did. That knowing about her guilt and mental health issues helped me make sense of it. But I also told her I wasn't ready to forgive her yet. Maybe not ever. What she did hurt me deeply. She made me doubt my husband, made me feel unsafe in my own family, almost destroyed my marriage. Understanding her reasons didn't erase that pain. Claire nodded slowly. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, that she knew she didn't deserve it. She just wanted me to know she was sorry, and that she was working on herself. We sat quiet for another minute. Then Claire said something that surprised me. She said she was grateful Sarah would get to know Rachel, that even though it meant accepting she'd failed as Sarah's mother, it was the right thing. She'd built their whole relationship on a lie, and now Sarah would pay the price for that. The hardest part, she said, was knowing that Sarah might eventually choose Rachel over her. That once Sarah knew the truth, she might decide her biological mother was her real mother, and Claire was just the woman who lied to her for 6 years. Her voice cracked when she said it, and I saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear of being exposed anymore. Fear of losing her daughter's love. I reached across the bench and touched Claire's arm. She flinched but didn't pull away. I told her that Sarah was lucky to have so many people who loved her. Rachel knowing her daughter didn't erase the 6 years Claire spent being Sarah's mom. Those years were real. The bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the first day of school, all of it counted. Claire looked at me with red eyes and asked how I could say that after everything she'd done to me. I said I understood she was broken, that fear and guilt had twisted her into someone cruel. That didn't make what she did okay, but it helped me see her as a person instead of just a villain. She started crying again, harder this time, and I sat with her until she stopped. We didn't hug or make promises about the future. I just told her to keep going to therapy and focus on being the best version of herself she could manage. Then I left her sitting on that bench and walked back to my car. 2 months passed before Mark felt ready to tell Sarah the truth. He'd been working with the child psychologist for weeks, planning how to explain adoption to a 6-year-old. Tom and I offered to be there for support, but Mark said he needed to do this with just him and the therapist present. The day it happened, I waited by my phone all morning. Mark finally called around noon and said it went better than expected. Sarah cried and asked a lot of questions about why her biological mom gave her away. The therapist helped Mark explain it in simple terms, that Rachel was very young and sick and wanted Sarah to have a better life. Sarah asked if Rachel didn't love her, and Mark promised her that wasn't true at all. Rachel loved her so much she made the hardest choice a mother could make. Sarah wanted to know if she could meet Rachel someday, and Mark said maybe, when everyone was ready. Rachel spent the next week writing a letter to Sarah. She called me crying multiple times, asking if she was saying the right things. I read draft after draft, helping her find words a 6-year-old could understand. She explained that she was very young when Sarah was born, only 19, and she was making bad choices that hurt herself. She loved Sarah from the moment she knew about her, but she knew she couldn't give Sarah the life she deserved. So she asked Mark and Claire to be Sarah's parents because she knew they would love her and take care of her. She said giving Sarah up was the hardest thing she ever did, but she thought about her every single day. The therapist read the letter to Sarah during their next session. Mark told me Sarah listened quietly, then asked to see pictures of Rachel. He pulled out his phone and showed her some old photos from when they dated. Sarah stared at them for a long time, studying Rachel's face. She asked if Rachel had the same color hair as her, and Mark said yes. Sarah touched her own hair and smiled a little. 3 weeks later, Sarah told Mark she wanted to meet Rachel. Mark called me that night and asked if I thought Rachel was ready. I said she'd been ready for 6 years. The therapist suggested a brief meeting at a park with supervision, just 30 minutes to start. Mark asked if I would come along for support, and I agreed immediately. The day of the meeting, I picked up Rachel from her apartment. She was shaking so hard she could barely buckle her seatbelt. I drove to the park and saw Mark's car already there. Sarah sat on a swing, kicking her legs back and forth. When she saw us walking over, she stopped swinging and stared. Rachel froze about 10 feet away, and I had to gently push her forward. Mark stood up and introduced them. Sarah looked between Rachel and me, probably noticing the family resemblance. Rachel knelt down to Sarah's level and said hello in a voice that barely worked. Sarah studied Rachel's face for a minute, then asked if she was her real mom. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she managed to say yes. She was Sarah's biological mother. Sarah asked why she gave her away, and Rachel said she was too young and sick to take care of a baby properly. Sarah asked if Rachel was better now, and Rachel nodded, saying she got help and was much healthier. Sarah asked if Rachel still thought about her, and Rachel said every single day. Sarah reached out and touched Rachel's hair, comparing it to her own. Then she asked if Rachel wanted to push her on the swing. Rachel looked at Mark, who nodded. Rachel stood up and walked behind the swing, giving Sarah gentle pushes while I watched from a bench nearby. Mark sat down next to me, and we didn't say anything, just watched my sister meet her daughter for the first time in 6 years. Sarah asked Rachel questions between pushes. What was her favorite color? Did she like pizza? Did she have any pets? Rachel answered each question carefully, letting Sarah control the conversation. After 30 minutes, the therapist said it was time to end the visit. Sarah asked if she could see Rachel again, and Rachel said she would love that. Over the next several months, Rachel and Sarah met regularly at the park, always with Mark or the therapist present. The visits got longer each time, starting at 30 minutes and eventually lasting 2 hours. Sarah warmed up gradually, going from shy and cautious to genuinely excited to see Rachel. She started calling her Rachel instead of using formal terms, which the therapist said was healthy. Rachel brought small gifts sometimes, nothing big, just coloring books or hair clips. Sarah showed Rachel pictures she'd drawn and told her about school. Rachel listened to every word like it was the most important thing she'd ever heard. Sarah still called Claire mom and didn't seem confused about having 2 mother figures in her life. The therapist said kids were surprisingly good at accepting complex family structures when adults handled it right. Claire struggled watching Sarah bond with Rachel. Tom's mother told me Claire called her crying after seeing photos Mark posted of Sarah and Rachel at the park. Her therapist worked with her on understanding that Sarah having more people to love didn't take away from Claire's role. Love wasn't a limited resource that got divided up. Sarah could love both her mothers without one being less important. It took months, but Claire eventually agreed to meet with Rachel to discuss co-parenting. They met at a coffee shop with the therapist present. Tom told me it was awkward and painful, but they managed to have a productive conversation about what was best for Sarah. Claire admitted she was jealous and scared of being replaced. Rachel promised she wasn't trying to take over, she just wanted to know her daughter. They agreed to keep communication open and focus on Sarah's needs instead of their own feelings. Jake started asking questions around the same time. He was 8 and smart enough to notice his parents didn't live together anymore, and everyone was upset. Mark sat him down and explained in simple terms that sometimes adults make mistakes, and families change shape. He promised Jake that both his parents loved him very much, and the divorce wasn't his fault. Jake asked if it was because of him, and Mark said absolutely not. Jake was the best thing that ever happened to him. Jake asked about Sarah and Rachel, and Mark explained that Sarah had a biological mother who wanted to be part of her life now. Jake seemed to accept this easier than the adults did. He asked if he could meet Rachel too, since she was kind of like family now. Mark said maybe someday. Tom and I had our own conversations about boundaries with his family. I told him I needed space from his mother for a while, and I definitely couldn't be around Claire. Tom agreed immediately and said we should limit contact to supervised visits with Jenna. His mother accepted these boundaries without argument. She focused on rebuilding trust through her relationship with Jenna, showing up for scheduled visits and respecting our rules. She never pushed for more or tried to guilt trip us. Tom said she seemed genuinely remorseful and committed to doing better. Rachel called me one Saturday and asked if I thought our parents were ready to meet Sarah. I talked to Mom and Dad that night. They'd known about Sarah for months now, ever since the truth came out, but they'd been waiting for Rachel to be ready. Mom cried when I told her Rachel wanted to introduce them. We planned a family gathering at my house for the following weekend. Tom, Jenna, and I would be there along with Rachel, Sarah, and Mark. My parents arrived early, nervous and excited. When Mark's car pulled up, Mom grabbed Dad's hand. Sarah walked in holding Rachel's hand and looked around at all the new faces. Rachel introduced her to my parents, explaining they were Sarah's biological grandparents. Sarah's eyes went wide. She asked if that meant she had 2 sets of grandparents now, and my dad said yes. She was very lucky. Mom knelt down and asked if she could give Sarah a hug. Sarah nodded and stepped forward. Mom held her and cried, and Dad put his hand on both their heads. Sarah asked if they had pictures of Rachel when she was little, and Dad said they had boxes full of them. Sarah asked if she could see, and my parents spent the next hour showing her photo albums, while Sarah asked a million questions. I watch Jenna toddle across the living room toward Sarah, who sits cross-legged on the carpet building a tower with colorful blocks. Jenna crashes into the tower with both hands, giggling as blocks scatter everywhere, and Sarah laughs instead of getting upset. She helps Jenna stack the blocks again, patient and gentle, and I feel something twist in my chest. These two little girls are cousins by blood in ways none of us expected, connected through secrets that tore our family apart and somehow brought us closer. Sarah shows Jenna how to place a block on top, guiding her chubby hands, and my daughter squeals with delight when the tower stays standing. My parents sit on the couch watching them play, Mom wiping tears from her eyes every few minutes. Dad keeps taking photos with his phone, documenting this strange new reality where his granddaughters play together while their mothers navigate complicated truths. Rachel stands by the window talking quietly with Mark, both of them watching Sarah with similar expressions of wonder and grief. I'm glad Sarah will grow up knowing her biological family, that she won't spend her life wondering about the missing pieces of her identity like Rachel did. The gathering feels fragile but real, like we're all learning a new language together. 3 weeks later, Tom comes home from work and finds me in the kitchen making dinner. He sets his briefcase down and tells me he had lunch with Mark today, and Mark mentioned he's seeing someone new. I stop chopping vegetables and turn to look at him, surprised because it's only been a few months since the divorce was finalized. Tom explains that Mark met a woman named Nolan Cross at a work conference, and she knows everything about the complicated family situation. She has kids from a previous marriage too, Tom says, and she told Mark she respects that he's committed to co-parenting with Claire and supporting Rachel's relationship with Sarah. Tom leans against the counter and says, Mark seems lighter somehow, like he's finally breathing again after years of holding his breath. I ask if Mark brought her around the kids yet, and Tom shakes his head, explaining that Mark wants to take things slow and make sure it's serious before introducing anyone to Jake and Sarah. Tom pulls out his phone and shows me a photo Mark sent, a casual selfie of Mark and Nolan at a coffee shop, and Mark is smiling in a way I haven't seen in years. His whole face looks different, younger, like someone lifted a weight off his shoulders. Tom says Mark told him that being free from a marriage built on secrets feels like waking up from a bad dream. I rinse the vegetables and tell Tom I'm happy for Mark, that he deserves to find someone who accepts all the complicated parts of his life. The next afternoon, a card arrives in the mail addressed to me in handwriting I recognize immediately. I open it standing by the mailbox, pulling out a simple card with flowers on the front. Inside, Claire has written just a few lines. She says she's sorry for everything she put me through, for the years of hostility and the horrible things she said at Jenna's birthday dinner. She writes that she's moved into her own apartment and is focusing on being a better mother to Jake and maintaining her relationship with Sarah. She doesn't ask for forgiveness or expect a response, just wanted me to know she's working on herself and hopes someday we can be civil for the sake of the children. The card is dated the day of Jenna's second birthday, and I realize Claire sent it on what must have been a painful anniversary for her. I stand there holding the card, reading it twice, then carry it inside and put it in a drawer. I'm not ready to respond yet, but I keep the card instead of throwing it away, and that feels like progress. Rachel calls me that evening while I'm giving Jenna a bath. She sounds excited, almost breathless, and tells me she just left her therapy session. Her therapist helped her work through another difficult memory today, she explains, and afterward Rachel felt something shift inside her. She's been seeing Sarah twice a week now, always with Mark present, and Sarah has started asking questions about Rachel's life. Rachel says she brings photo albums to their visits, showing Sarah pictures of herself as a child, and Sarah studies them intently, looking for similarities between them. Last week, Sarah asked if Rachel likes the same foods she does, and Rachel discovered they both love strawberries but hate bananas. These small connections feel huge to Rachel, she tells me, like she's getting to know her daughter piece by piece. She never pushes Sarah for more time or attention, just follows Sarah's lead and lets their relationship develop naturally. Rachel's voice cracks when she tells me that getting to know Sarah, even in this limited way, has brought healing she never thought possible. She says she spent 6 years believing she'd made an unforgivable mistake, that giving up Sarah meant she didn't deserve to be a mother. But watching Sarah grow and thrive, seeing that her decision gave Sarah a stable home even if the circumstances were complicated, helps Rachel forgive herself a little more each day. I dry Jenna off and carry her to the bedroom while Rachel talks, and I tell my sister I'm proud of her for doing the hard work of healing. 6 months after that explosive dinner at the restaurant, Tom and I host a family gathering at our house. I spend the morning cooking while Tom sets up extra chairs in the dining room, both of us nervous about having everyone under one roof again. Rachel arrives first, carrying a homemade dessert and wearing a new dress. She looks healthier than I've seen her in years, her face fuller and her eyes brighter. Mark shows up next with Jake and Sarah runs straight to Rachel for a hug before even taking off her coat. Jake hangs back, shy around Rachel still, but Mark encourages him to say hello and Jake manages a quiet greeting. Tom's parents arrive last, his mother carrying a bouquet of flowers and looking uncertain about her welcome. I accept the flowers and direct everyone to the living room, where Jenna immediately demands attention from her grandparents. The atmosphere feels tense at first, everyone too polite and careful, speaking in measured tones and avoiding controversial topics. But then Sarah asks if she can show Rachel her new coloring book, and Rachel sits on the floor with her, while Sarah explains each picture in elaborate detail. Jake joins them after a few minutes, adding his own commentary, and the adults gradually relax, watching the children interact naturally. Tom's father starts telling stories about Mark and Tom as kids, and Mark laughs for the first time since arriving. I serve dinner and we all crowd around the table, passing dishes and filling plates, and the conversation flows more easily than I expected. Tom's mother asks Rachel about her job, and Rachel talks about a project she's leading at work. Mark tells everyone about Jake's soccer team making the playoffs. I watch them all making an effort. Choosing kindness over grudges and seeing everyone try feels like progress, even if we're not completely healed. During dinner, Sarah sets down her fork and looks between Rachel and Claire, who sits at the far end of the table. Sarah's voice is small, but clear when she asks if she can call Rachel something special, something different from what she calls Claire. The table goes quiet, and Rachel's eyes fill with tears. Sarah suggests Mama Rachel, to distinguish her from Mom Claire, and asks if that would be okay. Rachel can't speak for a moment, just nods while wiping her eyes, and finally manages to say, "That would be wonderful." Claire's face goes pale, but she forces a smile and tells Sarah that sounds perfect, that it's important for Sarah to have special names for both her mothers. The moment stretches out, significant and fragile, and I see Rachel mouth thank you to Claire across the table. Sarah seems satisfied with the arrangement and goes back to eating her mashed potatoes, unaware of the weight of what just happened. Mark reaches over and squeezes Sarah's shoulder, his own eyes wet, and Tom's mother dabs at her face with a napkin. The rest of dinner feels lighter somehow, like we've crossed an invisible threshold. Sarah calls Rachel Mama Rachel twice more before dessert, testing out the name, and each time Rachel's face lights up like someone gave her an unexpected gift. I watch this strange new family dynamic taking shape, messy and imperfect but genuine, and I think about how Sarah is learning that families can have complicated structures and still be full of love. That night, after everyone leaves, Tom and I clean up the kitchen together in comfortable silence. He washes dishes while I dry them and put them away, and we work in the rhythm we've developed over years of marriage. Once the kitchen is clean, we sit on the back porch with glasses of wine, listening to crickets and watching fireflies in the yard. Tom says he's been thinking about everything that's happened over the past year, and I tell him I have too. We talk about how our family has been permanently changed, how there's no going back to the way things were before that dinner at the restaurant. Tom says he's angry at his mother for keeping secrets, and at Claire for years of cruelty, but he's also grateful that the truth finally came out. Rachel has her daughter back in her life, he points out, and Sarah knows her full story instead of growing up with hidden pieces of her identity. The pain was terrible, he admits, but some good came from the truth being revealed. I lean against his shoulder and agree, thinking about how secrets rot families from the inside. We sit there until the mosquitoes drive us inside, talking about the future and how we'll navigate this new family structure. Tom promises we'll keep protecting Jenna while also helping her understand her extended family as she grows older. I promise to keep working on forgiveness, even though it's hard, because holding on to anger only hurts me. The next morning, I pull out my phone and stare at Claire's contact information for 10 minutes before finally typing a message. I write that I appreciate her apology, and I'm working toward forgiveness, that I understand she was suffering under the weight of her secrets, even if it doesn't excuse her behavior. I tell her I don't expect us to be close, but I hope we can eventually be civil for the sake of the children, that Jake and Sarah and Jenna deserve adults who can be in the same room without tension. I hit send before I can change my mind, then set my phone down and try not to obsess over whether she'll respond. 3 hours later, my phone buzzes with Claire's reply. She thanks me for reaching out and says she doesn't expect us to ever be friends, but she hopes we can find a way to coexist peacefully at family gatherings. She writes that she's grateful I'm not trying to keep Jenna away from Jake and Sarah, that the cousins deserve to know each other. Her message is brief and genuine, without the manipulation or passive aggression that used to characterize her communication. I save the message and feel something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of letting go. 2 weeks later, Tom's mother calls and asks if she can take Jenna to the park. My first instinct is to say no or insist that Tom has to go with them, but I force myself to pause and consider. Tom's mother has shown up for every scheduled visit with Jenna over the past months, respecting our boundaries and never pushing for more. She brings age-appropriate toys and reads to Jenna patiently, and I can see she genuinely loves her granddaughter. I tell Tom's mother yes, she can take Jenna to the park, just the two of them. She sounds surprised and grateful, promising to have Jenna back by lunchtime. I watch from the window as Tom's mother buckles Jenna into her car seat, and I have to resist the urge to run outside and change my mind. Tom comes up behind me and puts his hands on my shoulders, reminding me that his mother has earned this trust through consistent behavior. I spend the next 2 hours anxious and checking my phone, but Tom's mother brings Jenna home exactly when promised, Jenna is happy and tired, clutching a new stuffed animal her grandmother bought her. Tom's mother thanks me for trusting her and doesn't overstay her welcome, leaving after just a few minutes. I realize I'm learning to separate my anger at her choices from her relationship with my daughter, though trust will take time to rebuild completely. Rachel stops by that afternoon with coffee and news. She sits at my kitchen table practically glowing and tells me she's been offered a promotion at work. Her boss called her into his office yesterday and said they were impressed with her leadership on recent projects and they want her to manage a whole department. The promotion comes with a significant raise and better benefits, Rachel explains, and she accepted immediately. She says she's been working toward this for years, but she finally feels stable and confident enough to step into a leadership role. She credits getting to know Sarah with giving her motivation to build the life she always wanted, that having her daughter back in her world made her want to become someone Sarah could be proud of. I hug my sister and tell her I'm proud of her, that she's overcome so much and deserves every good thing coming her way. Rachel tears up and admits she never thought she'd have a career she loved and a relationship with her daughter, that for years she believed she'd ruined her life with one mistake. But now she's learning that people can heal from their worst moments and build something beautiful from the wreckage. We sit there drinking coffee and talking about her new role, and I watch my sister finally becoming the person she was meant to be before addiction and trauma derailed her path. 3 months after Rachel's promotion news, Mark's lawyer calls with the final divorce papers. The judge signed off on everything that morning, and Mark texts me asking if I can meet him for coffee to talk about how to tell the kids. We sit in a booth at the diner near his new apartment, and he looks tired but calmer than I've seen him in months. He says the custody arrangement splits Jake's time 50-50 between him and Claire, alternating weeks so Jake can have stability in both homes. Sarah's primary custody stays with Mark, but Claire gets her every other weekend and 1 evening per week for dinner. Mark pulls out the paperwork and shows me the section about holidays and birthdays, how they'll rotate years so the kids spend Christmas with one parent and Thanksgiving with the other. He says it was hard negotiating all the details, but both he and Claire focused on what would hurt the kids least. Claire agreed not to fight for more custody of Sarah, because she knows Sarah needs time to adjust to having Rachel in her life too. Mark tells me he's grateful the whole process didn't turn into a battle, that his lawyer warned him these things usually get nasty, but Claire's therapist helped her stay focused on the children instead of her anger. I tell Mark I'm glad he and Claire managed to put Jake and Sarah first despite everything that happened. He nods and says Sarah has been asking more questions about Rachel lately, wanting to know about her biological mother's childhood and what Rachel was like at her age. The next weekend, Rachel brings Sarah to our house for a play date with Jenna. Sarah and Jenna play in the backyard while Rachel and I sit on the porch watching them. Sarah comes running up to Rachel and asks what she was like when she was 6 years old. Rachel glances at me and I give her an encouraging nod. Rachel sits down on the grass and Sarah plops next to her, looking up with those big, curious eyes. Rachel tells Sarah she was a lot like her at that age, loved playing outside and reading books about animals. Sarah asks if Rachel had a mom and dad who loved her, and Rachel says yes, she did. Those are Sarah's grandparents who Sarah met a few months ago. Sarah gets quiet for a minute, then asks why Rachel gave her to Mom Claire and Dad Mark. Rachel takes a deep breath and explains in simple words that she was very young and going through a really hard time, that she was sick and couldn't take care of a baby the way a baby deserves. She tells Sarah that giving her to Mark and Claire was the hardest thing she ever did, but she wanted Sarah to have the best life possible. Sarah asks if Rachel was sad, and Rachel admits she was incredibly sad, that she thought about Sarah every single day. Sarah reaches over and pats Rachel's hand and says she's glad Rachel is better now and can be her Mama Rachel. I watch my sister's eyes fill with tears as she hugs Sarah gently. Sarah pulls back and asks if Rachel still gets sad sometimes, and Rachel says yes, but seeing Sarah and getting to know her makes the sad feelings much smaller. Sarah seems satisfied with this answer and asks if she can go play on the swings now. Rachel laughs and says of course, and Sarah runs off to join Jenna. I reach over and squeeze Rachel's hand, and she squeezes back without saying anything, because we both understand how important that conversation was. 2 weeks later, Tom mentions that Claire joined some kind of support group for mothers dealing with adoption issues. He heard it from his mother, who heard it from Claire's therapist, who suggested the group. Claire apparently goes every Tuesday night and has been opening up about her fears and guilt to other women who understand what she's going through. Tom says his mother told him Claire seems lighter lately, less weighed down by the secret she carried for so long. A few days after that, Claire texts Tom asking if she can talk to him about something important. They meet for lunch, and when Tom comes home, he tells me Claire wanted him to know she's learning to forgive herself for her mistakes. She told Tom the support group helped her realize she's not a terrible person, just someone who made bad choices out of fear and desperation. Claire said she's accepting that Sarah having Rachel in her life doesn't erase the 6 years Claire spent being Sarah's mom. Tom says Claire actually thanked him for being supportive of her relationship with Jake and for not trying to keep the kids from her despite everything that happened. I tell Tom I'm glad Claire is getting help and working on herself, that maybe someday I'll be able to have a real conversation with her without all the anger between us. A full year passes since that explosive dinner at the restaurant where everything fell apart and came together at the same time. We're planning Jenna's second birthday party, and I'm addressing invitations when Tom asks who's on the guest list. I tell him everyone, both sides of our complicated family, because Jenna deserves to have all the people who love her at her party. Tom looks surprised but pleased and helps me finish the invitations. The morning of the party, I'm setting up decorations in our backyard when Tom's parents arrive early to help. Tom's mother brings a beautiful cake she made herself and asks where I want her to set it up. I direct her to the table under the big oak tree and she arranges it carefully while Tom's father strings up the birthday banner. My parents show up next with bags of presents for Jenna and immediately start playing with her in the grass. Rachel arrives with Sarah and Mark, and Jake runs straight to the bounce house we rented. Sarah asks if she can help decorate, and I hand her a roll of streamers to hang on the fence. Claire shows up last, parking down the street and walking slowly to the backyard gate. She brought a small gift wrapped in pink paper and sets it on the present table without making a big entrance. The atmosphere feels warm despite the obvious tension humming underneath everything. I watch everyone interact carefully, being polite and making an effort for the sake of the kids. Tom's mother helps my mother with the food while Tom's father talks to Mark about work stuff. Rachel plays with Jenna and Sarah, keeping them entertained while I finish setting up. Claire stays mostly on the edges, talking quietly with Jake, and watching the other adults with cautious eyes. I feel grateful looking around at all these people who've been through so much together. Grateful that we found a way to move forward, instead of letting the pain tear us apart completely. When it's time for cake, everyone gathers around the table and sings happy birthday to Jenna. I watch Claire and Rachel standing on opposite sides of the table, both helping Sarah hold her plate steady while I cut slices for the kids. Claire hands Sarah a fork, and Rachel wipes frosting off Sarah's face with a napkin, and they manage to coordinate without speaking directly to each other. I'm struck by how far we've all come from that terrible night at the restaurant when secrets exploded and family bonds shattered. The healing isn't complete and probably never will be because some wounds leave permanent scars, but we're learning to coexist in our new reality. This complicated family structure where Sarah has two mothers and everyone knows the truth. Claire catches me watching and gives me a small nod. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. Rachel sees the exchange and relaxes slightly, focusing back on Sarah who's asking for a second piece of cake. I realize that this is what moving forward looks like. Not perfect harmony, but genuine effort from everyone involved. Tom pulls me aside while the kids are playing and the adults are cleaning up paper plates. He tells me he's proud of how I've handled everything this past year, especially my compassion toward Rachel and my willingness to eventually forgive his family. I lean against him and admit that holding on to anger was hurting me more than anyone else, that I didn't want Jenna growing up watching her mother be bitter and resentful. Tom says he knows it wasn't easy for me to let go of the hurt his sister caused, that most people wouldn't have been as understanding. I tell him I want Jenna to see healthy conflict resolution, to learn that people can hurt each other badly and still find ways to repair relationships. Tom kisses my forehead and says that's exactly the kind of mother he knew I'd be. We stand there watching our daughter play with her cousins, and I feel a sense of peace I didn't think was possible a year ago. As the party winds down and people start gathering their things, Sarah runs up to Rachel and Mark with an excited request. She asks if she can have a sleepover at Rachel's apartment soon, maybe next weekend. Rachel looks at Mark with hope and uncertainty in her eyes, and Mark smiles and says that sounds like a great idea. Sarah jumps up and down clapping and asks what they'll do during the sleepover. Rachel suggests they could make pizza together and watch movies and paint their nails. Sarah hugs Rachel tight and then runs to hug Mark too, thanking him for saying yes. I watch this casual exchange and I'm amazed by how easily Sarah moves between her two mothers and her father. The way she trusts both Rachel and Claire, the way she includes Mark in her excitement, it shows how children can adapt to complex family structures when the adults handle it with care and consistency. Jake comes over and asks if he can come to the sleepover too, and Mark laughs and says, maybe next time. This one is just for Sarah and Rachel to spend time together. Jake shrugs and runs back to the bounce house for one last jump before they have to leave. That night, after everyone has left and Jenna is asleep in her crib, Tom and I sit on our porch in the darkness. The house is quiet except for crickets chirping in the yard and the occasional car passing on the street. Tom takes my hand and we sit there reflecting on the past year. Everything that's happened since I exposed Claire's secrets at that family dinner. I tell Tom I never intended to blow up our family like that. I just wanted to defend myself and Jenna from Claire's accusations. Tom says he knows, that he doesn't blame me for what happened because the truth would have come out eventually anyway. We agree that while the revelation was painful and messy, it ultimately freed everyone from years of guilt and fear and dysfunction. Rachel got her daughter back in her life. Sarah learned the truth about her adoption. Mark escaped a marriage built on lies, and Claire finally got help for the issues she'd been hiding for years. Tom says our family is stronger now for having faced everything together, that secrets were poisoning us all and now we can build something healthier. I lean my head on his shoulder and admit I'm tired but hopeful, that I think we're going to be okay. We sit there in the darkness for a long time, holding hands and listening to the night sounds, Both of us understanding that our family will never be simple or easy, but it's ours, and we're going to keep fighting for it. That's it for today's story. Thanks for spending part of your day here. It really does mean a lot. I hope it left you with something gentle and good.